what I'd like to do next is welcome to the stage Dr. Nicole Forsgren. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Nicole. You've probably read her book. You've almost certainly read some of her research. She was the lead author on the book Accelerate, which you've all probably read or at least know of. She was foundational to bringing the science to this study of this thing that we call DevOps. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Nicole Forsgren.
Let's see. Thank you so much, everyone. Hearing Nathan talk about how DORA has been around so long just makes me feel like an old, but it's probably true at this point. I am really excited that everyone is here today, and mostly that we're all still here talking about technology and finding ways to make it better for everyone, especially now that we're in this new moment where AI is kind of taking over the world. I don't know if anyone's heard about it. Nah. Right. Nah, I mean, it's just kind of some fluff. I've been doing a bunch of work in some of the space lately, and the thing that I have noticed is that what it's doing is really accelerating development, right? I mean, I don't want to be this person, but we told them so, right? I mean, we kept saying that it was important to be able to develop and deliver and ship software faster and more securely and more reliably. Like for a while, and by a while I mean like a decade, right? And then like this AI hotness came along, and suddenly we're seeing brand new developments come out at this pace where it's like, it's a year, and then it's 6 months, and then it's 3 months, and then it's 1 month. And now, organizations of all stripes, not just these like bananas startups, have to be able to turn around a brand new, amazing, revolutionized experience seemingly overnight. And now everyone's like, oh my gosh, I have to be able to ship software. And we're like, wow, whoever would have known? So that is one moment that I'm kind of seeing happen right now. And by now, I mean like over the last year or two. Something else that's happening is people really, really caring even more about how do we talk about productivity? How do we measure the effectiveness of our software systems? And then another one that's happening is developer experience. Is anyone like hearing about this? And it's like this brand new hotness. So I know. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well, and tomorrow. But I think the thing that I'm saying to kind of kick this off just a little bit is that all of these really at their core come down to how do we safely and reliably and effectively deliver software in ways that just don't grind people to the ground. And these all just really come together into space and DORA. And so today I'm going to be talking about DORA, kind of a quick 101 just in case folks have not heard about this at all and just randomly walked into the room because they wanted some free coffee and donuts. I'm not mad about that at all. How do we use this framework in a way that makes sense for signal and action? How does space even relate? Because I've done a little bit of work here recently. And then what's the future? So, hi. I'm Nicole. I've done some work in this space. What's probably most important is I really love Diet Coke and tacos. I can easily be bribed. And as I was mentioning, DevOps was really the original hipster for making work more productive and more sustainable. It was so funny. I was sitting around with some teams recently, and someone said, you know, it's really interesting because we've been working on this project, you know, and he was giving someone the 101, kind of the TLDR, and someone said, you know, it's really interesting. You're really integrating people into this project. It's kind of like not just DevOps, but like team ops. And I was like, say that to me one more time. And he was like, yeah, because like you're integrating people. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I hate to be this person, but I'm going to bring up I'm going to just cite my own work because I just know the URL. I can just find it. And I brought up like Dora.dev. And I was like, let's go back to the first Data DevOps report that I was on, because then I just like know what's on it original. I'm like, here's 2014, here's 2015, here's 2016, here's all of these reports. here's culture, here's lean process, here's all these things. And he was like, wow, really? And I'm like, there have always been people here. It's always been about people. And I'm like, I can find an old talk where I was definitely talking about how you can't just like sell it as a tool. He's like, wow. The whole team's like, all in unison, wow, really? And I'm like, what is happening? This is not it. And then I kind of mentioned DevOps was originally called Agile System Administration. Because when Agile started, it was about shipping story points faster, and they realized that they were just lighting their sysadmins on fire, and they felt really bad. And so we wanted to find ways to not just be more productive, right, do the more things, but also do them better in ways that didn't actually light people on fire. And so when we think about it that way, DORA and space fall into this realm of, yes, sure, productivity does matter, but it's also about finding ways to do this more sustainably. And so they help us understand and measure, yes, and improve our productivity and our well-being. So high five, folks, original hipsters. So what is DORA, right? What is this for? Is it for benchmarking? I guess, if you're only paying attention to those 4 metrics. But it really is not just about benchmarking, right? I love that Nathan in his kickoff this morning talked about these overall capabilities, right? There have been times when folks are like, I just don't like DORA. It just makes me feel bad. Like, sorry. There's a whole rest of the book. There's a whole rest of this research program. If those 4 metrics are what are meaningful for you, and maybe this was like a big mistake that I made in running those clusters and then creating those benchmarks, because it gave people the anchor toward, and it kind of created this motivation. But then there's and then what's next? And then what do I do with that? And then what are my action steps, right? Because it really is this framework that helps us do a handful of things. It helps us improve these outcomes. It helps us think about measuring performance. It then helps us identify our core capabilities for improvement. And by our, I mean where we're sitting in our organizations and in our teams, our personalized and specific capabilities for improvement. And not only that, because of the way the research was done, it tells us how to do that. It gives us those evaluative capabilities. What does it mean to do automated testing in ways that are predictive for improvement? What does it mean to have a better change process in ways that actually move the needle? What does it mean to do CI, right? And interestingly, probably not a surprise for folks in this room, it's not just the automation. It's also a cultural and behavioral change so that we care about keeping the build green, right? So I think this is where we talk about using the frameworks and the metrics in a signal and action kind of framework here. So signal says, how am I doing? And this is where I kind of joke about, right? Like, DORA just makes me feel bad. DORA just gives me a score. It gives me a red, yellow, green, or however someone built it into their dashboard. And then action. What can and should I do to improve? And we have to have both. If I only have signal and no action, then yeah, we've basically given someone a report card and then walked away. And that does feel bad, right? That sucks. And I think the power in so much of this lies in our ability to have both signal and action, both a metric and a community and organization and teamwork-based set of actions that we can take to improve it. The other thing that I love about this is that these can cascade. Now, what do I mean by that? We can have something like the DORA 4 that says, this is how well I'm performing overall in my ability to kind of develop and deliver software, right? This is how my tool chains are doing. But then you can also say, these are my priorities. I'm going to focus on, let's say, automated testing. Well, then you can say, for my team or for my group, let's focus here. How well are we doing? then these are my actions, right? Which specific steps am I going to take? So now, how well is the team doing, or how well is the group doing on automated testing? And now, what are my specific steps? Am I cleaning up my flaky tests? Am I cleaning up am I cleaning up this test suite? Am I going to keep rerunning these tests? Am I going to stop running my tests? Exactly what am I going to do to clean this up over time? Right? So again, now, we can do this a few different ways, right? How do we identify the capabilities? We can identify this using DevX methods. We can use value stream. We can walk around. We can ask people what they swear at most often. We can use open spaces. I'm excited that this is what we're going to be doing here today. These can be very, very powerful methods. The other thing that's exciting about this is that we can then invite everyone to participate, right? Another wonderful tool that we have is the quick check, right? This can give us a clue about what a lot of people struggle with given the performance profile that we have. Now, let's go to space metrics. Why am I even going to, kind of pivot into here? What does this mean? And what is space for? Is it a single set of metrics for everything? No. Also no. This is a framework to think about how to measure, let's say, productivity. And this can be any type of complex creative work. When we wrote up the space framework, we kind of situated it within developer productivity, but it can be used for anything. I actually had a copywriter in LA reach out and say that they used it to measure some of their work. And these two are complementary. DORA and space go together quite well. Now, how is that? It's because once you've identified some of the capabilities you want to improve, possibly using DORA, you can then use space to identify how you want to measure them. So, what is space? It is complementary to DORA. It's not a replacement or an evolution of DORA. They're very different things. Space is a framework to identify the metrics that are appropriate for a specific thing that you want to measure, but it doesn't tell you exactly what those metrics are. DORA is handy because it tells you a pretty specific set of metrics for a particular thing, right, for that software delivery process. Space just says, here's a way to think about it. Once you've identified a thing you want to measure, how should you do that? Space is also much more broad than DORA. DORA is for DevOps. DORA is for your software delivery process. Space is like, so, you got a thing you want to measure. Here's how to think about it. And it's very, very holistic. In case you haven't heard of space, and a handful of you are probably like, has anyone heard of space? Now, this is a safe space. Pun not intended. Has anyone not heard of space? And is just like, what is she talking about? I apologize. I should have led with this. Okay. Here's why I wrote space, and a handful of us got together. I kept having people come to me under the auspices of DORA or measurement, and then I would get in the room and they'd be like, okay, so I have this thing I want to measure. How do I measure this? And this happened for years, and finally I was like, I'm having the exact same conversation every single time. Has that ever happened to any of you where someone comes and asks you the exact same question every single time? Has that ever happened to anyone in this room? And we realize that we're giving people frameworks to help guide them through the same challenges that we keep seeing. I realized that the same challenge that I kept seeing people have was about measurement. And the general idea was use multiple metrics. Make sure that those metrics are in tension. Make sure that they cover a certain set of categories. And then once I sat down with a few of my colleagues, I was like, these categories always fall in the same general area. So I was like, I should write this down because I'm repeating myself so often. Now, it could be about developer productivity, hotness at the time, right? Or it could be about peer review. or pull request review. It could be about code review. It could be about CI. It could be about coding time. And then we were thinking, okay, how can we help people think through this? Also, I need an acronym because that's the only way I'm going to remember it consistently. There were 5 categories, and it's SPACE. S is for satisfaction and well-being. How does this impact the satisfaction and well-being of the person, or how does it reflect the satisfaction and well-being, or the satisfaction of the tool itself? So a good example here is, are you satisfied with the tool? Are you satisfied with the process? Now, this can be incredibly insightful. This can give you very, very good insights, because if someone's like, I can't use this tool, it's incredibly hard to use, this is just too hard, or I really, really love this tool, it's incredibly easy, I really love using it, that gives you really good insights, right? Some people are like, I don't know, people lie. Are people going to lie about loving to use a tool for something that, as Nathan mentioned, is incredibly complex? Probably not. Well-being is also important, right? Because we mentioned incredibly complex work tends to burn people out. It tends to be very high in cognitive load. We've also found that satisfaction and well-being ends up being very, very highly correlated with most of the other dimensions here. And so this will often be a leading indicator. P, performance. This is going to be the outcome. So think of something like quality, reliability, some of those. Activity. These are counts. These are numbers. These are the things that we usually think about because they're super easy to automate. They tend to come out of our systems really, really easily, which means these are the things that almost everyone only uses. Lines of code, I hate it, it still happens. Lines of code, number of commits, number of PRs, number of something, okay. Communication and collaboration. Think broadly here. It could be about how people talk to each other, could be about how systems talk to each other, could be API calls, could be about the searchability of your code base. How easy is it to find code? Sometimes this is incredibly difficult. Randomly interesting, we found that one-on-ones that people have ends up being highly correlated with the amount of time they spend coding. And so sometimes you find really interesting correlations here where you do kind of want to like reduce meetings, but not necessarily all meetings, right? So which things are, let me finger quote, good, and which things are not so good. Efficiency and flow. How do things flow through the system? Now, in Lean, we see this show up quite a lot, right? How many stops do you have? How fast does it go? In incident management, how many hops does it, now this is a number, but like roll with me here, because sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, but how many hops does it take until it gets to the right person to answer the ticket, right? So that's kind of an efficiency metric. Also, when a person is working, this could be a subjective metric, but how often do they feel, or how long do they feel that they're in the flow? This is a really good measure for things like cognitive load, right? Because we know that deep work and engaged work is really, really important. Now, we also know that within the SPACE framework, we want to cover at least 3 of these at a time, because it helps us balance things. Now, 3 categories, not 3 metrics. I'm sorry, I award you no points. If you only have 3 activity metrics, it does not count. So this is where SPACE comes in, because once you've identified something that you want to measure using DORA, then people say, well, how do I measure it? If it's something that's specific to the existing DORA framework, sometimes you can pull from something that we've already done. But what if it's something that's just slightly outside of it? Can everyone always hire a consultant? Maybe not. But now you can go to SPACE, get some really good ideas. Sometimes they'll come from your systems. Sometimes they can come from people. Now, here's an example from incident management, because again, it doesn't have to be developer productivity. For satisfaction and well-being, how satisfied are SREs with the incident management process? How satisfied are they with escalation and routing? How satisfied are they with on-call rotations? These are really good, especially because burnout is so prevalent in SRE. Performance. Now again, these are going to be outcome metrics, something around system reliability. Maybe monitoring systems' ability to detect and flag issues faster. Activity. We can look at number of issues caught by monitoring systems, number of incidents created, number of incidents resolved, and you can do this by severity distribution. Now, I'll share all of these slides. I included a bunch of notes here. Communication and collaboration, I've got a bunch here. People included in resolving the incident, the teams those people came from, how they communicated. Now, how they communicated could be by the medium, right? Was it in Slack channels? Was it in Teams? Was it in email? Was it in the ticketing system? Quick quality scores, right? Could they give a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Now, efficiency and flow, right? Again, incident handoffs, incident assignment and reassignment, number of hops. Applied to testing, I've got a bunch of examples here. By the way, I realized as I was going through this, the DORA metrics are space. They actually fit within the space framework. Remember, we wanted to cover at least 3 dimensions. Lead time is efficiency and flow because it's a time metric. Deploy frequency is activity because it's a number. MTTR is efficiency and flow. Change fail rate is a performance metric. And when you add availability, that's also a performance metric. So we end up covering 3 dimensions. Now, for one example, space for devs. We wanted to look into how productivity actually matters, but for a developer. I don't know about you, but every time I hear people talk about productivity, it's all about how managers benefit. You know, when I'm a dev, I don't care if my manager benefits. I care if it helps me. And so when I was at GitHub, I worked very closely with Irini Kaliamvoku, and we wanted to do a study to see if developers can get quick and easy signals so that they can have good days. And good days and better days more consistently, more reliably, more often, right? Because sometimes you're like, this day was amazing. Does anyone ever have that where you're like, this was great? And then some days you're like, this day sucked. I don't know if you ever have that. Some days I have that. And then the end of the week, I'm like, but why? And I can look over my calendar, and some days I know, because it's like a bunch of meetings, but some days I don't. And I'm like, how? How can I consistently design my days so like I know when they're gonna be dope? That's what I want. How can I give this to devs? That was the motivation behind this study. So we used space. This was one of our earliest tests of space. So to capture it quickly, we asked a bunch of questions like, how was your workday? By the way, the goal was to let them answer questions in 2 minutes or less. So how was your day? I worked with other people. My work was interrupted. How many meetings did you have? And today I felt most productive and least productive, like in the morning, in the afternoon, right? Like basic time blocks. We also captured their GitHub activity data. This was completely optional, completely opt-in, and we let them know that their data would not be shared with anyone but themselves and the very small research team. The full instrument's available online. Here's what we found. Interruptions were a big deal. Minimal or no interruptions, they had an 80% chance of having a good day. Interruptions scattered throughout the day, only a 7% chance of having a good day. Interruptions are a big deal. And just the act of having that 2-minute reflection survey, right, as a reflection at the end of the day, they liked that quick check-in. It gave them a wrap-up at the end of the day. This echoes another study that one of my peers, Jenna Butler, did. For more info, including an example of what a report looks like, go check out Good Day Study. You can Google, GitHub Good Day Study if you want to find it faster than this link. I do want to take just a couple minutes to chat about the future of DORA, if it's okay. I know I'm over just a minute or two. What's next? Unfortunately, I do not have my crystal ball. But as I mentioned earlier, DORA's past and present work is really aligned with all of the latest trends. And I think that reflects a lot about the work that we've done, but also the community. Anytime I was doing research, I came to the conferences, I chatted with the community, I asked what everyone was working on. I think that speaks to a lot of what we do and what we care about. And I'm incredibly grateful for everyone here, right? Everything that we're hearing about, developer experience, we care about people's work and we care about improving it. Reliability and security, we care about the systems, we care about our organizations, and again, We care about people's work, and we care about their lives and their work-life balance. Effectiveness and efficiency, again. Culture, we know this is the only way to enact change. And again, that story I told earlier about reimagining people into DevOps. We know this is not just about tools. We know that this is a holistic change. The DORA team, I want to take just a minute to talk about. I have had, over the last couple of years, a bunch of people ask me how I feel about stepping away or having a little bit of distance from the DORA team. I'm still involved a bit in the community, and I'm real excited about that. But I think, again, the strength of DORA is both research and community. So in terms of this, I think there's no one better to lead this than Nathan Harvey. I'm very grateful for his work here. He has so much expertise in the research program and what it means to apply it in large organizations and these really hairy and difficult and exciting transformations. And he has such a deep background and expertise in community work. I would also really love to shout out the research team. Dustin Smith was PI in 21 and 22, and he worked with me on that 19 report. And now Derek DeBellis is leading 23. So if everyone would just take a minute with me to thank them. Thank you. And like I said, the strength of DORA really is the research of the community. And there is no one at all who is better suited to apply, test, ground, kick the tires, find the holes, fill in the holes, all of this, than everyone here and everyone in this broader community. Everyone here really is the heart of this work and has been since all of this started. This includes everyone here. This includes everyone on the original research team. This includes Alana. This includes Nigel. This includes everyone. So I am so grateful for all of you. So thank you. So the TLDR today. We can improve our work. We can use data to guide us in the right way. We need to use signal and action when we do this. DORA and space are complementary, and we can improve not just systems, but also the work of the people when we do this. Thank you so much, everyone. And now I would love to hear your questions. I think we do have a few minutes for that. Is that right? Perfect. Yeah.
You mentioned 3 categories, right? Non-metrics. So when you say, you said 3 categories.
3 categories.
Yes. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the categories and then how you measure those categories? So say like testing or maybe, incidents, etc. What means the categories?
Yes. So the question is, I mentioned 3 categories, and I think you're talking about the space framework? Perfect. Yeah, so when I mentioned capturing 3 categories, we should measure at least 3 of these categories within the space framework, and then how do we measure them? This is a wonderful question. So once we've identified something that we want to measure, it could be a DORA capability, it could be part of our culture, it could be anything that we want to measure that probably revolves around complex work. We should make sure that we first start with or think about some type of dimension that we want to measure, right? Could be satisfaction, could be activity, it could be performance. I'm just picking these out of thin air, right? And then let's say that, of the topic or the category that we want to measure, again, culture, CI or testing, once we have the dimension or the category picked, let's pick some dimensions. How do we measure them? At that point, I really, really love this question because many times we want to start with something that's fairly fast and fairly available, right? And so we might look to see what data do we already have. Do we have existing survey data in our company that's good enough, right? Do we already have an NSAT survey? Do we already have an NPS survey that gives us some touch on satisfaction? Do we already have objective data? Do we have telemetry in our systems that we could use to touch on probably activity, or maybe efficiency and flow, or maybe performance? Do I have something there? Now, that's why I suggest looking at what we already have and then referencing back to space. Because if we don't, otherwise we'll say, oh, I already have a whole bunch of data, let's just go with that. And most of the time, it will all be activity data. And so we'll only get one view of a system, and then we'll report something out, and people will say, oh, perfect, let's increase this. And you've only increased activity, right? Because we know that people will move according to the metrics that are kind of in front of them, right? Like, it's just human nature, right? Even the best intentioned people are going to kind of act according to what's in front of them, right? That which gets measured gets managed. And so if you're only measuring an activity metric and you're not including something that's balanced, yeah, does that help? Okay, great. Yeah.
You mentioned the GitHub project. Oh, I can do this.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you mentioned the GitHub project, and I think that was 2021. Could you say a little bit more about what happened next? Did they keep doing that Good Day project? Did it morph into something else?
Great question. So that was a quick internal project. We actually had a set of folks operationalize it into a tool, and I believe it may have been open source. Right now, there were 2 or 3 teams internal to Microsoft that are building out Good Day projects and agents. And so I know there are a few teams internally to Microsoft that are building that out and that are using Good Day project. I would say, like, the general methodology, we've tweaked 1 or 2 things that are specific to their teams and to their metrics and tools and operationalizations. And so it's being used there across a couple orgs. That's time. Thanks so much, folks. I'll be around.